Warning: the following contains scenes and discussion of extreme violence, rape, torture, transphobia, lesbophobia, necrophilia, and cannibalism. Viewer discretion is advised.
KYOTO ビデオ。
Well, here we are. One of the big ones. Another entry we've pulled from the illustrious violence canon, and wouldn't you know it, it's the anime that gave the canon its very name. The reputation of Violence Jack very much precedes it. It has certainly earned its place amongst its brethren in the canon, but at the same time, it's also one of the more under-discussed titles of said canon. People will chat about and shit-talk anime like Mad Bull 34 and Genocyber quite openly until the cows come home, but Violence Jack always appears to be one of those anime titles discussed only in hushed tones. An ultra-violence title with content so extreme that it got censored and banned for most of its lifetime. For the longest time, it felt like owning a copy of Violence Jack, let alone an uncut copy, felt like being in possession of a type of contraband. But luckily, in our far more civilized times, we need not to worry about that. The fine folks at Discotheque Media have been ensuring that an uncut copy of Violence Jack be readily available for the whole family to enjoy since 2015. But with that accessibility problem out of the way, there's still the other accessibility problem. When I say that Violence Jack has extreme content, I mean extreme in all caps. It makes Ninja Scroll look like a prairie home companion. I mean, you saw the disclaimer at the beginning, right? You didn't just scrub past it out of impatience. It's got all that stuff and more. And this inevitably leads to people spending more time talking about certain scenes of this anime and asking the question, can you believe they got away with this shit? And not enough time probing the question of whether Violence Jack is a good anime or not. In doing KYOTO video, I've learned that not all hyperviolent anime is created equal. Some titles are good, others are trash, and some titles are just good trash. So we have to ask ourselves, which category does Violence Jack fall into? An anime of such infamy is just begging for me to slice it open and dig around in its warm, glistening entrails to find out if there's any way it justifies its existence aside from being a vehicle for trashy nonsense. Let it be shown that by putting this particular anime under the proverbial magnifying glass, that I am not a coward. My name is KB, and I will analyze any retro anime you put in front of me. With some exceptions, of course. But before we probe Violence Jack with the rusty chainsaw of critical analysis, we need to warm ourselves up by hacking away at the anime's meat with the machete of historical investigation. Reminder, this is still a very Go Nagai Halloween. This ain't your average ultraviolent anime. This is an ultraviolent anime with its origins from a manga legend, and such anime deserves all the context it can muster. Go Nagai began publishing Violence Jack on July 22nd, 1973, shortly after he had completed work on his last big hit, Devilman. 1973 would end up being a very big year for Nagai, as that was the same year he would publish two very influential titles, Cutie Honey and Mazinger Z. But Violence Jack came before those two titles. Running in Monthly Shonen Magazine, a magazine for young boys if you can believe that, the plot of Violence Jack is set against the ruins of the Kanto region of Japan that has been desolated by a massive earthquake. An earthquake so mighty that it has cut Japan off with the rest of the world and has completely reduced society to a state of barbarism. Since civilization's grip on mankind has grown weak and arthritic, society has devolved to the point where the strong and savage routinely prey on the helpless. In these hellish times, a mysterious giant of a man roams the waste. Primal, ruthless, and nigh unkillable, this human beast, armed only with a ginormous jackknife, goes from settlement to settlement helping those who cannot help themselves and expecting nothing in return. Whether it's taking down a group of bandits or facing off his reoccurring arch-nemesis, the warlord known as the Slum King, this man's only desire is to seek out people who would harm others and brutally murder them. he is known throughout the wasteland by one name: Violence Jack. Violence Jack by design is more episodic than Devilman. Nearly every arc follows the strict formula of Jack visiting a settlement, bad things happen, Jack ends up fixing the problem more or less, and then leaves. Some dissenters of this manga have called it plotless, what with there being very little change to the world at large through Jack's actions, but it actually holds its own as a manga thanks to Nagai's strong narration and some of his most dynamic artwork seen in his career up to that point. And while it didn't have the same impact as Mazinger Z or Cutie Honey did, Violence Jack still influenced a lot of creators. Creators Baronson and Tetsuo Hara were greatly influenced by Violence Jack in their creation of the hit series Fist of the North Star. Kentaro Miura cited Violence Jack as his main inspiration in the creation of Berserk and its protagonist Guts. And even game developer Suda51 claimed to have been influenced by Go Nagai's manga in the creation of the No More Heroes series. So in a way, out of all the titles in the Violence canon, Violence Jack is the one that has the most eminence. But what people really associate Violence Jack with the most is the content that lurks within its pages. Being a man whose creative spirit is fueled entirely by his own audacity, Go Nagai is most assuredly not afraid to push the limits of what can be shown in shonen manga, and Violence Jack is him towing the line in the sand. Not only is it one of his most brutally violent works, but it's also one of his most sexually explicit, containing many scenes of rape, sexual violence, and drawn-out torture, almost always involving women. Considering both the content and the basic story structure, it could easily be assumed that Violence Jack is nothing more than Go Nagai's own dark, twisted fantasy land where he can vomit up his most twisted ideas and have them play out. And it is, but to Nagai's credit, he is willing to go the extra mile to completely justify the manga's existence by having it be a stealth sequel to the Devilman series. It would take way too long to go fully in depth with the connections between Devilman and Violence Jack, so to keep this brief, there are hints throughout the manga that this world is related to the Devilman world, what with people occasionally turning into demons and certain characters looking suspiciously like Devilman characters. In the end, it is revealed that the world of Violence Jack was the world that was recreated at the end of Devilman, and that Jack is implied to be a reincarnated Akira Fudo, specifically the TV version of him, merged with the part of Devilman. And while this twist has reached the level of it was his sled amongst certain manga fans back in the 70s, you best believe that this was a hell of a twist, and was one of the first instances of Go Nagai welding the worlds of his work together, a habit that he would continue to do throughout his career. So, being a manga that was produced by a popular creator that was primarily known for his high level of violence, sexual or otherwise, it was ripe for the picking for the early OVA market of the mid-80s that was slowly discovering that the titles that were sold well were usually the ones that were too hot for TV. Between 1986 and 1990, 3 OVAs based off the Violence Jack manga were made: Harlem Bomber, Evil Town, and Hell's Wind. It should be noted that Go Nagai had little to no involvement in the creation of all 3 of these OVAs, and unofficial sources say that he was ultimately disappointed with how the final products came out. How encouraging. Now, I'm gonna do things a little different here. All 3 OVA entries in the Violence Jack series were produced by a different production team, resulting in all 3 episodes having radically different budgets and direction than the last. And because the structure follows the episodic nature of the manga with zero continuity between episodes, reviewing the Violence Jack series as a whole is an exercise in futility. So I am going to analyze each episode in order of release, one at a time, finding their individual strengths and weaknesses, and then using the combined results to form my ultimate conclusion. Trust me, you'll thank me later.
With the strength of 50 men, the fangs of a tiger, and an unquenchable appetite for destruction.
The first Violence Jack OVA, 1986's Harlem Bomber, exists mostly as a primer to the Violence Jack series as a whole. It begins with a prologue explaining how shit got so fucked up, and introduces us to our titular protagonist in a manner befitting his heroic personality.
And in those eyes burns a malicious primal cunning.
And the first thing we see him do is engage in fisticuffs with his nemesis, the Slum King. So already you got your setting, hero, and villain set up within the first 5 minutes. The anime continues from there with Slum King deciding to send one of his most powerful men after Jack, the eponymous Harlem Bomber. And after that, the anime mostly decides to focus on a girl named Mari who has been captured by the Slum King's goons and sent to a sex camp to be broken in as a sex slave.
As a sex slave, you have to do more than watch. And now I'll find out what you can do.
Her long-lost boyfriend, Kenichi, mounts a rescue mission with the unexpected help of Jack, who just so happens to be in the area. and since this sex camp is coincidentally run by Harlem Bomber, it's inevitable that all these plot lines converge into some sort of serendipitous climax. Harlem Bomber was produced by the studio Ashi Productions. While that studio has most assuredly seen better days, in the 80s, Ashi Productions was on an upward trend, having established success in the early 80s with titles like Ghost Shogun, Space Warrior Baldios, and their most well-known hit at the time, Magical Princess Minky Momo, the same magical girl anime known for killing off its eponymous heroine as a screw you to a toy sponsor for pulling funding. First impressions are always important for an anime, and the impression I got from watching the first Violence Jack is, wow, this anime looks like ass. It's honestly refreshing in a way. This past year, KYOTO Video has been painting a far more rosier picture of the hyper-violent 80s OVA era with titles like Devilman, Bow, and Wicked City. So it's nice to finally kick back and relax with a trashy OVA that actually looks like trash. I mean, this is borderline Wounded Man territory. Not only is the animation so choppy to the point where every character not frozen in place moves like they are in an exceptionally outsourced Filmation cartoon, but the animation is just so cheap that it ruins the blocking. Because the animation appears to be more focused on being cost effective over telling the story, there's almost zero clarity with how the characters move. You only really understand what's going on thanks to the characters constantly narrating what they are doing at that moment. For instance, near the end of the fight between Jack and the Slum King, there's a huge tidal wave in the background, and I thought it was there for dramatic effect like you would see in a Sentai show. But no, apparently it was a for real tsunami, despite there being no indication that they're anywhere near the ocean, and you would not have known this had Slum King not recapped the fight in the next scene. We don't even get to see the aftermath of said tsunami because the anime chooses to have all action scenes that would last more than 30 seconds take place conveniently off screen. Yeah, we could have had a sequence of Jack storming Bomber's compound, kicking ass and taking names, but that's not on our budget. So instead we'll just show you the aftermath. There was an awesome action scene here, but you just missed it.
Damn it! What do you mean Jack won?
Well, I shouldn't be surprised.
The only moment in Harlem Bomber where there's any thought put towards the direction is, embarrassingly enough, a lengthy and graphic rape scene in which Mari and her friend Yumi are assaulted into submission by a lesbian dominatrix.
Open yourself to me. Enjoy the experience.
By the way, did you know you can only get this OVA in adult video stores for a time? But even if these animators were gifted a Robot Carnival level budget and the same raw talent that God bestowed James Baxter, it still couldn't remedy a plot that is thinner than gas station toilet paper and just as abrasive. Jack and Harlem Bomber, both of whom this anime is named for, are complete non-entities in their own story. Despite being given a hyped-up entrance worthy of Conan the Barbarian, Jack ends up taking a backseat to this love story between these two teenagers that is apparently so intense that Mari's friend is willing to sell them out in a fit of contrived jealousy. The entire cast is filled with these two-dimensional stock characters, from the cartoonishly evil slaver dominatrix to the hapless street urchin. And because the anime refuses to grow these characters beyond their given role, it makes the drama surrounding them feel artificial and nakedly choreographed. It speaks volumes when the death of the street urchin, whom I have completely forgotten the name of, is handled with all the care of someone dropping their jacket on the floor.
It's Jack! He's the spirit of death! But at least I'll be able to be reunited with my dear mother again.
We're going to need another Timmy!
But the moment that really shows the production staff's true feelings on the project is in the climax where Jack beats Harlem Bomber and in the process utters the only lines he has in the anime. I am not kidding.
Alright, you asshole, I'm gonna send you straight to hell.
I'll go home when I'm good and ready.
You what?
I've come for your soul, Bomber. Bastard!
And then Mari decides to rescue Jack from the collapsing compound, odd considering the two hardly had a face-to-face meeting, and Jack thanks Mari and Kenichi by bringing down their helicopter to save himself, giving Kenichi one of the most stiffly animated deaths I've seen in my life. And then the OVA ends with Mari being the sole survivor looking out on the horizon and seeing a golden bird in the sky that is unsubtly implied to be Jack. Long story there, better explained in the manga. And that's it. Mari doesn't say anything or even mourn the loss of her boyfriend that she spent the entire anime talking about. It honestly feels like Ashi Productions really did not want to be working on this anime. It's obvious that this was done on the quick and cheap and that it was only meant to squeeze a few extra dollars from the perverts who weren't already watching Minky Momo. The only really redeeming quality out of this VHS shelf filler is the dub, which, once again, is the product of manga entertainment at their most mid-90s.
God damn it! Where the hell is Jack? The fucking chicken shit! Fucking shit! Fucking shit!
But other than that, there's really nothing here. The animation is too cheap, and the minimal direction and plot makes it feel like the only reason this anime even got made was for the bit of lesbian non-con in the middle.
Doesn't matter whether you like it or not. From now on, your slave girls and slaves do exactly what they're told.
I've heard worse excuses to make an anime.
There's somebody in there. Is it a man?
Yeah, it definitely is.
Alrighty, now this is where things get spicy. Despite Violence Jack Harlem Bomber being such a catch-penny adaptation, it's sold well enough to justify another entry in the series, Violence Jack Evil Town. Production was transferred over from Ashi to a more specialized studio, the short-lived Studio 88. While we don't know much about this studio, we do know a lot about Evil Town's director, Ichiro Itano. For all you mecha fans out there, his name rings a bell. Itano is one of the most highly influential mecha animators in the history of anime. His work on Gundam, Space Runaway Ideon, and Macross set the gold standard for dogfight scenes in mecha anime, to the point that his style of highly acrobatic and missile-heavy fight scenes has its own nickname, the Itano Circus. He is also known for his love for extreme, violent death scenes. One of his first scenes as an animator that put him on the map was the infamous scene in Gundam where Char Aznable shoots Cecilia Zabi in the face with a rocket launcher. In short, directing Violence Jack was the role Itano was born to play, baby. The plot of Evil Town concerns a group of Kanto citizens who have been trapped in an underground mall due to the massive earthquake and have split into 3 groups. Section A, consisting of ordinary citizens led by a mayor. Section B, consisting of a street gang led by the hulking Mad Saurus and his transgender GF, Blue.
Remember what the little pig told us? About Section A digging a way out, Perhaps this guy's from outside.
More on her later. And Section C, consisting of beautiful fashion models and female wrestlers, led by fashion designer Isla Mew. And because of the limited supply of food and water, the 3 sections are constantly at war with each other and are desperate to get out to the surface. During a dig, Section A ends up coming across Jack sealed in a rock wall.
This jackknife has lent me its name, so call me Jack. Call me Violence Jack.
This ends up kicking off another battle for resources between the 3 groups, this time who gets to hire on Jack as a protector/weapon against the other groups. Now already you may have noticed, hey, we got a budget now! Out of all the Violence Jack titles, Evil Town is the one that looks the best. And while that might not be saying much for certain shots, things do look more detailed, there's more than a passing thought put in the overall blocking, and the overall atmosphere fits the tone the original manga was going for. Being set underground gives this anime an appropriately dark color palette that fits the grim themes of this anime. And when I say grim, I mean grim. The Evil Town story arc is one of the darkest and most misanthropic storyline in the Violence Jack saga, and that already should be saying something. You should know when you're getting into when one of the first scenes ends with a police officer shooting a child pleading for his life.
Well, honestly, I'll disappear. Let me live!
Yeah, I'll go as well.
Kenichi, turn the light off.
Yeah, got it.
Sudo, bring Kenichi's body back. It'll serve as a warning to the others.
We're gonna need another Timmy.
But it isn't until the end of Act 1, when Jack successfully defends Section A from an attack by Section B, when things start getting really hairy. Soon after the attack, all 3 sections agree to meet in neutral territory to make an offer to Jack to either come to their side or stay with Section A. Section B obviously gets turned down flat, but the ladies of Section C make a compelling argument by telling a story about how they were formerly of Section A until all the men of that section drugged, raped, and even murdered some of them.
You don't have any right to do this to me. You men are just filthy savages.
Shut up, you bitch. Given a straight choice of fucking me or dying, you'll choose fucking me.
Yeah, this scene and another coming up is a reason why Violence Jack stayed in licensing limbo for so long. But being fair, one narrative detail I do like about the scene was how it was mentioned that the men stopped after discovering food and water, and then tried to pretend that the mass rape and murder of the women didn't happen.
But all were killed directly or indirectly by men who claimed to be civilized. Ever since that attack, they've tried to rebuild their facade of refinement. But they're brutes. Filthy, degraded brutes.
It's one of the few humans are the real monsters moment in this anime that has a subtle, almost realistic creepiness to it. After hearing the story, Jack decides to go with Section C since he can tell they need the most help. This is another point in Eviltown's favor. Jack is more like his literary counterpart in that he has that hidden heroic spirit to help those in need in spite of his violent and apathetic nature. Whereas in Harlem Bomber, he was more of an unfettered beast who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Anyways, as soon as Jack arrives in Section C, their excavation team ends up discovering a way to the surface. Isla decides she wants to save all the people in Section A and B because it's the right thing to do. And right on cue, Section B launches an attack on Section A and kills their leadership, with the resident cop completely selling the entire group out.
All right, throw down your weapon and give yourself up, Takamatsu.
But I surrendered to you.
Well, to be fair, he did what any police officer would do in that situation. Matsaurus ends up luring Jack away from Section C, and the following scene is where I want to talk about Violence Jack's main flaw as an adaptation. Both Violence Jack the manga and Violence Jack the anime have the goal of delving deep into the hidden darkness that lurks beneath the mask of humanity. When the laws of civilization no longer apply, what's getting in the way of indulging in your worst desires? But the problem with stories that focus the camera on the worst aspects of humanity is that they walk a fine line. Is the constant parade of vile acts on display actually saying anything about the human condition, or is it just the creators reveling in their own worst desires of their id? Go Nagai is certainly one of the more indulgent mangakas out there, but after watching Eviltown and reading the manga arc it is based on, it frankly amazes me how Uncle Go approached the following scenes compared to the anime. To summarize, Section B begins an attack on the fleeing Section C. One member of Section C decides to stay behind to buy the others more time. Meanwhile, Jack is having a Fist of the North Star style fight with Matsaurus, and once he dispatches but doesn't kill him, he tries to get back to Section C. It doesn't take long until Section B catches up with C, and after jumping and killing their strongest member, a cute muscular lady wrestler, I know, I'm upset too, you guys. The entirety of Section B then proceeds to violently rape all the members of Section C, which they do until Jack arrives and brutally murders all of them. Now, let's play a game of compare and contrast, because this is where a lot of things change in the transition from manga to anime. One difference being the reason why Section B is chasing the women in the first place. In the anime, they don't even know about them finding a path to the surface and just want to rape them because they're just violent criminals. In the manga, Section B actually gets word that Section C has found a path, and because they think civilization is still intact on the surface, they think their crimes below the surface will be found out. So the reason why they attack Sections A and C is because they need to leave no witnesses. Raping the ladies is just a bonus. Also a big change is the person who volunteers to stay behind to buy the rest of Section C time to escape. In the manga, it's a group of men who want to redeem themselves for the crimes they helped commit. In the anime, it's another female wrestler.
Don't worry, I won't be far behind you.
All right, Maria. Just promise me you won't get yourself killed.
And just before the unpleasantness starts, Jack comes across her naked, desecrated corpse that the camera lingers on for way too long. But the big difference is in the rape scene itself. In the manga, it's an extended horror scene that's played in near silence, with the men of Section B literally turning into horrifying beasts and just descending on these women like hungry animals. Objectionable content aside, it is not played for titillation, a fact that's compounded by the narration summing up the horror. I wouldn't be surprised if it was this particular sequence that inspired Miura, because it feels straight out of the pages of Berserk. But in the anime, it just feels way more salacious. It actually takes away a lot of the horror elements by not having the attackers turn into monsters, and the camera really just presents the rape as is, not really adding to the horror of it, which in turn makes me feel like I'm watching a porno. This scene doesn't really horrify so much as it just makes me uncomfortable and causes me to ask myself, should I be watching this? At the very least, we also find out that Section B's female members also engage in this act, so we're 2 for 2 in Violence Jack portraying lesbians as psychotic rapists. Bonus points for this unnamed girl because it's established earlier that she gets off on killing children.
I hate little kids. Filthy little brat.
We're gonna need another Timmy.
I wonder if that's the justification for giving her the most violent death at the hands of Jack in the entire series.
Oh, please don't! Ah!
Charming. But it wouldn't be a discussion of poor portrayals of marginalized peoples if we didn't talk about the character Blue. As an explicitly trans character, Blue is a walking mass of troubling tropes. Not only is she voiced by men in both versions, but she is highly sexualized to the point that she doesn't so much say her lines as much as moans them out.
That's a tasty looking piece of pork you've got there. Perhaps you'll let me have a little nibble on it later. My goodness, he's a very big boy. If he's not too big for me, I want him. Oh my goodness! In the old days, it was you guys who used to call us a bunch of crazy, perverted, whacked out fucks.
Let's not forget the moment where she's about to be killed by Jack and ends up pissing herself out of fear and possible arousal. And of course, she's also one of the rapists. And in both versions, she's portrayed as this unnatural being, with the fact that she has a penis being something that's supposed to make her unsettling. In short, Blue's entire character is the anime saying that trans people are sexually deviant freaks of nature. J.K. Rowling cannot know this anime exists. And as testament to her highly sexualized portrayal, Mad Source comes across Blue's decapitated corpse and proceeds to do this.
We could have a really good time in real hell as well. I never want to be parted from you again.
And then he eats her corpse and gains superpowers. Oh my god, what are you even doing, Violence Jack? Evil Town is such a disgustingly edgy piece of work, and that makes me really frustrated that the climax is also the best part of the entire series. The fight scenes between Jack and Mad Source were already the best part of this anime with how well animated they were, but having the final showdown in this anime be this incredibly stylized fight scene where the two characters are just completely painted in red against a black backdrop is one of the few moments of genuine artistry on display in Evil Town.
And now you die!
I would almost say that this whole scene was worth it because of how well it takes advantage of the medium while staying true to the anime's tone. Just wish I didn't have to wait through all of that to get to this scene. And then the anime just kinda peters out after that. Section C makes it to the surface, realizes that civilization has fallen, and Isla makes a declaration that they'll just have to start over again while the camera pans over shots of some ruined buildings. Guess I can't fault this anime for sputtering out after wasting all its energy on 20 minutes of carnage. I kinda feel the same way myself. Oh shit, we still got one more to go.
Could it be the gang we've heard about?
Yeah, we'd better be on our guard.
Shit, it's Hell's Wind!
The gang's called Hell's Wind.
For the last Violence Jack OVA, there was not a change in production studio, but there was a change in director. Because Itano was most likely off making Angel Cop at this point, directing duties got turned over to Takuya Wada, who had done animation direction, storyboard, and character designs for the last OVA. So they are at least trying to remain consistent between OVAs. But I think another important detail to know is that Wada was also animation director for multiple episodes of Fist of the North Star, because this is what essentially this OVA is. A biker gang, the titular Hell's Wind, attacks a peaceful settlement named Hopetown, and naturally Jack gets involved. Oh, and a woman named Jun also gets involved because she wants revenge against Hell's Wind because they killed her boyfriend in the cold open scene that this anime is most well known for. I struggle to really formulate my thoughts on Hell's Wind because it really commits on being middle of the ground, having neither the laughable cheapness of Harlem Bomber nor the voyeuristic edginess of Evil Town. I guess one thing I can say about it is that the animation is remarkably inconsistent, sometimes looking more amazing than it has any right to be thanks to talented people like Shinya Ohira and Shinsaku Kozuma, and sometimes looking like a child's refrigerator drawing. And this being one of the few credits as a full-blown director, it feels like Wada's not using a style of his own and is instead cribbing from more talented directors. Let's not kid ourselves here, the entire cold open looks like a B-grade Yoshiaki Kawajiri picture, but I think my biggest quibble comes from the plot. The whole story, being based off an early story arc, is Violence Jack at its barest essentials. Evil Gang does horrible things, Violence Jack meets Evil Gang, Violence Jack does violent things to Evil Gang, and Curtain. It does try to dress things up by filling it with some awesome moments like Jack tanking an anti-tank missile, but watching this made me feel like I was just watching a louder, angrier reskin of a Fist of the North Star episode. They even give Jack a kid's sidekick for crying out loud.
Come on, Jack, we have to hurry or it'll be too late.
We're not going anywhere.
Huh?
Saburo.
But Jack.
No buts. I'm going on alone from here.
But I think the biggest waste in this OVA is the entire character of June. She gets so much build up as someone who desires revenge on Hell's Wind for murdering her boyfriend and raping her because, of course. She is someone who has completely transformed herself to enact her ultimate vengeance on the people who took everything from her. And it all gets tossed out the window for her to be captured and be subject to an extremely lengthy torture sequence.
You know, you're not a bad-looking girl. But once I've finished with you, you'll be a work of art. I know, but it's all for the best. Think how beautiful you're gonna look.
And I think this might actually have something to do with the anime simplifying the manga's already simple plot. In the manga, the event that caused Jun to swear revenge actually happened before the Kanto earthquake. Hell's Wind caused her to crash her car, which ultimately killed her boyfriend. And because the proper authorities wouldn't take the case, it actually adds a layer of complexity to her vengeance because it's only made possible thanks to the collapse of law and order. Plus, she actually gets some good hits in before she gets captured by Hell's Wind, only being taken down by a surprise attack. In the anime, she winds up surrounded by Hell's Wind and surrenders without a fight. And that's it for her plot. Once she ends up rescued by Jack, we never hear from her again because the anime thinks we care more about that dumb kid that's been following Jack around this whole anime.
If civilization is going to rebuild itself, then it's going to need a lot more men of your character, Saburo. We'll meet again. I'm sure of it.
Oh, and the kicker of it all is that the tail end of Hell's Wind tries to bring it all back to the Slum King and set up for another sequel. No, you had your chance. You dropped the storyline halfway through this first OVA. You can't pick it up back now. It's got ants all over it. So after exhaustively covering each and every one of the Violence Jack OVAs, how do I feel about the OVA series as a whole? You want to know how I feel? I feel tired. After watching all 3 OVAs back to back twice, I felt like I had worked an entire 8-hour shift. I didn't feel the satisfaction of watching something moving or thrilling or entertaining. I instead felt tired and emotionally drained, and not in a good way. The whole crux of Violence Jack is that you are witnessing pure evil in anime form, and you get to see this hulking brute pay evil onto that evil because violence is awesome. And while it may have 1 or 2 really cool moments, I really don't like the fact that I had to wade through a river of shit just to get to them. 80% of the content in this anime just made it feel not really worth it in the end. The fatal flaw of Violence Jack is that it is too in love with its own carnage. By indulging in its own worst desires with such length and frequency, it isn't before long that the shock factor wears off, and you just realize how much of Violence Jack is long stretches of boring. When you see a woman get sexually tortured for the 10th time in the last half hour, it's hard not to want to yell, "Yeah, I get it, can we move on please?" And for that reason, Violence Jack doesn't really justify its existence. It's not like Devilman or Ninja Scroll where the objectionable content is dressed up into something far more entertaining. For the most part, it's just plopping down scenes of chainsaw murders and mass rapes and telling us to eat it up like the pigs we are. It's a curiosity and nothing more. But maybe you are better off not watching Violence Jack. If you are desperate for your retro anime violence fix, there are so many more options out there. Infamy can only go so far, and you don't need to settle for a novelty like Violence Jack. Well, I hope you all have enjoyed this very Go Nagai Halloween. Right now, I want to focus on more positive things. Maybe next time I can do a very merry Yoshiyuki Tomi no Christmas.
What about the Zaku pilot?
Nothing left, sir. A pile of hamburger.
You know what, on second thought, maybe not.